Hey there, it's Tom Jordan. Got a great program today. Thanks for your time on this October 7th, 2024, a year after the attack on Israel, the terrorist attack. We're going to get to that in just a moment. And also, Senator Lana Theis is going to join me to discuss a couple major related topics: the detrimental impact federal electric vehicle mandates will have on the automobile industry, especially in the Midwest, but really all over the country, threatening jobs and imposing burdens on consumers. And then the reality of what these mandates mean for national security and the very ready acceptance from the political elites to giving China seemingly an upper hand in the race for energy dominance. We're also going to speak with Bert Herzog with Executive Wealth Management about Friday's job numbers, what that means for the economy, and Donald Trump's latest argument about the economic dangers of Kamala Harris's economic policies. We'll get into that. But first, it is October 7th, 1 year after the Hamas launching its deadly invasion of Israel, killing about 1,200 people on that day alone and taking more than 240 civilians hostage. And, since that fateful October day, which came as a surprise seemingly to everyone, the conflict between Israel and Hamas has only intensified. And now with tensions rising between Israel and Iran, the future of the conflict remains pretty uncertain as Iran continues to back these groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, seemingly with support all over the world for these terrorist organizations. So now we got this risk of a broader regional war. It looms large, probably larger than ever in the history of Israel. We've had correspondence reporters out there highlighting how the conflict has evolved and raises the question of what the United States response might look like if tensions escalate any further, and what the U.S. response should look like right now, today. How much do we truly back the country of Israel in this fight for their very existence? The Biden administration is being closely watched to see if it will take stronger action to prevent a larger war in the Middle East, and this is of huge consequence to even us here in the United States. So here's some things just to keep note of as we're looking back a year later at these look at the terrorist attacks that occurred on that day. Biden is very weak on foreign policy, and that has, a lot of experts say, emboldened Iran to do just these types of things. The administration's reluctance to take decisive action against Iran and its proxies has allowed Tehran to play a larger role in the Middle East, endangering both Israel and also U.S. interests. 1 year of escalating violence since that time. This hasn't been resolved, not even close. And despite the global condemnation, of course, of these attacks, Hamas continues to thrive, thanks in part to the lack of strong, coordinated international action, particularly from these Western powers like the United States. Now we see what France is pulling back and these other Western countries of the support of Israel. The entire hostage crisis highlights really the failure of diplomacy. Like, let's talk about this first, and that'll work. No, it hasn't. So the ongoing captivity of these hostages serves as a very stark reminder that these diplomatic efforts have failed to bring about any resolution, with U.S. leverage seeming weak on the international stage. And think about it. And Benjamin Netanyahu has gotten so much pushback because he wants to root out Hamas, the constant threat to his country, with very little support from like the United Nations and these other international bodies. In the meantime, Iran is expanding its influence, Iran increasing its influence through groups like Hezbollah. The lack of American deterrence in the region is becoming glaring, raising fears of a larger regional conflict that will threaten, undoubtedly, global security. So, in my view, it's time for a much stronger U.S. stance on this. They need to staunchly support Israel no matter what in this situation, because these are terrorist organizations. Whether you're talking about Hezbollah, you're talking about Hamas, the Houthis, or just Iran in general, the biggest sponsor of international terrorism is the country of Iran. So if we don't take a stronger stance against this and really back Israel on this, whether through the economic sanctions against Iran, military support for Israel, And yeah, some broader diplomatic efforts as well. The instability is going to continue to grow with these global consequences, the constant threats that we're even seeing now. Protests all over the world on college campuses, including right here in the United States. Those need to be shut down. That is, if you want to talk about hate speech, that is hate speech, and calling for the eradication of the state of Israel. Later in the program, we're also going to talk, and we're going to hear some of the Israelis there and how the international media is covering this. Thankfully, there are still some good ones out there who are staunchly standing with Israel. All right, so before we get to Senator Theis, just a reminder to chime in. You can comment, you can ask questions in the comments section, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or X or wherever you are. Remember, this all lives on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. We'll get to those comments in a moment as well. Also, the best way you can really help us, you can help Tom Jordan Live simply by subscribing free of charge and then click that notification bell. That's just sitting right there, just begging you to click it. So go ahead and do it. Give in to that temptation. All right. You're going to hear from a number of left-leaning media outlets, these Biden administration officials saying that a push to renewable energy and to electric vehicles is going to make us much more energy independent in this country and to help us quickly decouple ourselves from the likes of China. That is completely false. Right now, China, one of these countries' biggest foreign enemies, is not only gaining ground, but they are dominating the world's energy supply and the markets and the manufacturing, and we are letting them do it. Take Michigan, for example. Look at this. This is Goshen, the plans for this Chinese-owned electric vehicle battery company. Michigan's lawmakers and these officials here, including members of Congress, have signed 36 non-disclosure agreements in connection with nearly $800 million in tax incentives for Goshen. Again, this Chinese-owned battery company raising a whole slew of transparency and national security concerns. And these agreements have sparked a lot of public outrage, rightfully so, over Michigan's involvement with a company linked to the Chinese Communist Party. Of course, all of this related to the electric vehicle mandates from this far-left Biden-Harris administration, which, despite their claims of increasing jobs and energy independence, would actually do the exact opposite. Somebody who knows a lot about this is Michigan Senator Lana Theis, and thankfully Senator Lana Theis joins us on the program. Senator, really nice to have you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. We're having trouble. I'm sorry, Senator, we're not able to hear you right now. I don't know if, I think you muted yourself. If there's a mute button somewhere, we'll click on that. And as you're doing that, I just want to remind folks that Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm, I would just say she's lying through her teeth. She was on my most recent station telling the host that I used to work at that a push to renewable energy and electric vehicles makes us energy independent. She said, this is the Energy Secretary of the United States under Joe Biden, and it's going to make us stronger than China in the Energy Secretary. Senator Lana Theis, I think you can hear me now. I can hear you. So we're good?
Can you hear me?
Yep, gotcha. Thank you. So Jennifer Granholm comes out and she says basically, listen, we're excited about this push to renewable energies and energy independence and all that, and then she says this actually makes us more energy independent if we go to all electric vehicles because we'll have the dominance over all of these various minerals that we need, like cobalt and whatnot, and it's going to finally let us be free of China and their dominance. Is she telling the truth when she says that?
Absolutely not. No, the majority of the supply chain associated with energy is controlled by China. They either do the mining or own the supply chain related to the processing of it. It's patently absurd. Can we roll back and start with Goshen and the problems associated with that and move on from why it's a security issue?
Yeah, let's talk about Goshen. So for our viewers out there, explain what Goshen is, who they are as a company, what they're trying to do in the state of Michigan.
So there's Goshen High Tech, which is headquartered in Hefei, China. And there's Goshen Inc., which is supposedly headquartered in San Francisco, but through all of the research that we've done, it's patently obvious that it's a wholly owned subsidiary of Goshen in China, and the pretend firewall that's associated with that is also absurd. It's not. Well, last summer they found 5 Chinese nationals spying at Camp Grayling, which is 88 miles away from where they want to put this Goshen plant. And they've now finally charged them. But that's obviously a problem. When you add that to the environmental issues that are associated with them sitting on a major watershed they haven't done the review of, and then you add that to the security issues, the environmental issues, and the economic issues. So we keep saying the government's giving them this money. No, it's not. Government doesn't make money. We've taken it from the taxpayers, and they're going to give it to Goshen. This is what they've committed to. The original offer was for over $1.1 billion in tax and subsidies associated with it. So between offsets for property taxes, for example, and offsets for energy, over $1.1 billion was the original offer. Now they've scaled that back a little bit and then scaled it back up. They're originally going to offer $65,000 a year jobs. It's mysteriously gone down to $45,000 a year jobs. But meanwhile, your taxpayer dollars are going to subsidize a Chinese plant making something that our folks don't want in order to take the employees away from people who are actually going to give them American jobs.
Right. Now, to that point, real quickly, then I want to get back to the more of the national security threat that Goshen poses. But to the jobs issue, that whole jobs argument, it doesn't seem to fly because, listen, it's what, $800 million in tax incentives. If you equate it, I think it's $350,000 per job that the state of Michigan is paying for. And yeah, you're right. Initially, they said, what, $65,000 would be the annual salary for one of those jobs, but it's really like 45,000 jobs. Will those jobs, first of all, even pan out? And secondly, if they do, is that worth that kind of a subsidy to pay for that kind of a job?
Well, worse than that, they're taking the employees away from people who are already providing them jobs. If you remember back in mid-22, late 22, when this was first approved, we couldn't find employees to save our lives. Everybody was coming to the state asking for help, trying to find employees. Meanwhile, the state is subsidizing, using their taxpayer dollars, subsidizing China to come in and build this business. And they'll tell you that it's not Chinese owned and it's a wholly owned subsidiary of Goshen in China.
Well, explain that, because you're right. They put up this so-called firewall, as you just described it, and that's essentially what it ended up being. They got one sector, I guess, of this company that's somehow based in, California. But the parent company is based in China itself. And we've heard all the rhetoric out there. I've heard reporters and talk show hosts say, this is owned by Volkswagen. It's not owned by China and all these American ownership. The reality is it is owned by China. And even if it's a fraction, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but tell me how this works. Because I read I think it's called the Articles of Confederation when it comes to Goshen. And the Communist Party of China has to have a presence not only within the company, but within the location of that company as well, which would be right smack dab in the middle of the state of Michigan. So based on that, what I've read, and despite some other journalists refusing to acknowledge this, what is the reality of the influence of the Communist Party in the state of Michigan based on the location of this plant that they want to build there?
Oh, I think it's patently obvious now that they've been able to see what's actually going to happen. We have 5 Chinese nationals that have gotten arrested at Camp Grayling while they were doing a major training that included Taiwan, by the way.
Nice. Okay, so help me understand this. So this is, Goshen is linked undoubtedly to the Chinese Communist Party. Why are Michigan lawmakers, not only on the state level, but federal level as well? You got members of Congress in Michigan from the Democratic Party who are signing these non-disclosure agreements to learn more and more about this Chinese Communist Party company without having to reveal the truth about this company to their constituents. Why are they so willing to do this?
So I can't speak on their behalf. I can tell you what my theory is, but I can't tell you what theirs is. If you're doing land purchases and that sort of thing, you don't want that to be public. So maybe that's where they were going with it. But they signed a non-disclosure agreement with MEDC without knowing who it was that they were going to be working with. Now, if anybody was going to do that and it was going to be an honest, we understand that you shouldn't know for sure where somebody's going to purchase land because that might make it more expensive. You would have some corrective measures in there, at least some protective measures in there. Does the community actually want it? Are you going to do business with a state who uses slave labor? Are you going to do business with a state who has called for the end of our culture as we know it? Those seem like some pretty basic questions that you'd want to ask before you sign a non-disclosure agreement where you refuse to talk to anybody about what it is that you're doing to our taxpayers and to our economy. The economics of this just don't make sense.
The Newsmax just put out a special. You were included in that as one of the experts on this because you're a senator working in the very state where this plant is being not only proposed but accepted and going to be developed and built in there. And they obviously this is connected to the electric vehicle mandate that Jennifer Granholm also claimed was not true, that there is no such mandate. That's just a talking point. We know that's the case based on their own fuel efficiency standards that they have put in place. But the Newsmax special touched a lot about the dangers that these mandates put into place. Can you kind of, your portion of that, talk about the electric vehicles, what they're going to do to jobs like in the Midwest, really and around the country, because the automotive industry is necessarily going to lose jobs if we go all in on the electric vehicles, because it takes fewer people to build those cars, by the way. And then go into the necessary components for electric vehicles and how that does not decouple us from China, as Jennifer Granholm claimed.
Well, let's start at the very beginning. So whether or not there's a mandate, the president came in and on his webpage, you can find executive orders that he said he was going to sign day one that direct the bureaucratic agencies to ensure that we are 50% electric by 2030, I think is what it started with. I think it's moved to 2032. That's not that far away. And it's really obvious that our community doesn't want it, nor can they afford it, nor is it a good idea. So lithium is highly combustible. It's not a particularly environmentally friendly thing to mine at all. But let's look at what the car looks like when you make it. It has literally thousands of batteries at its base. It's at least 30% heavier than a gasoline fueled car of the same size. You have to create a vehicle that's got significantly heavier metal in order to do that. It wears through tires faster and it wears roads faster. So none of that is environmentally friendly. But then when you get into, for example, in Goshen, if you're going to move these super heavy products, you have to have rail. Well, Goshen in Big Rapids doesn't have rail. This is why I've been fighting this for over a year and a half. You should be doing it in a dry climate. Humidity is causes lithium to be very combustible. So Michigan might, as you well know, not be a dry climate. And then you're moving these super heavy semis with this super heavy material that has to be sent back to China for processing, which is part of what we'll get to in a minute, on the roads with families in their vehicles in the middle of a Michigan winter. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's the least likely place where you would want to put one of these plants. And so it got on my radar right away. And then as you dig deeper and deeper, you start to find out where the problems are. And I don't assume that Governor Granholm is ill-intended, but what she said is absolutely wrong. The majority of the minerals are mined elsewhere. But by the time you look at where they're mined, who owns the mines and who owns the shipping, you're looking at over 90% control by China.
Yeah, let's bring that up because Jennifer Granholm did say that this will allow us to be not only energy independent by switching to renewable energies, it also allow us to do all the mining here in this country. And she specifically mentioned cobalt. We're going to have access to cobalt. But Cameron, we have a graphic here that I want to show you, and I'll let you, Senator, talk about the graphic in terms of who in the world actually has control of all the supplies and minerals that are necessary to build these electric vehicles. Cameron, do we have that graphic? Okay, there's the resource extraction and the processing. So why don't you explain what we're looking at here?
So if you look at the top two bars, you're seeing oil and natural gas. And you see in the purple, those are mined in the US. Fantastic. As you go a little bit further, you see copper is mined elsewhere in Chile. You see nickel is mined in Indonesia. Cobalt, primarily the Congo. The rare earth minerals are primarily China. And then lithium, primarily Australia. That's where they're mined at. That's where they're extracted from. And that has its own set of problems. The Congo is using child labor as they're doing mining. Rare earth metals are being mined by the Uyghurs. It's just horrible. We are outsourcing the things that we have made illegal in the US, and we're just doing it someplace else in the name of going green. The only thing green about this is that we don't get to see that it's actually happening, but it's happening. We're outsourcing the CO2 output. It's like, I don't know if you remember, back in the day when you were on an airplane, they used to have a smoking section
Yes.
on an airplane. All right, well, if you have that smoking section and you mandate they chain smoke, and then you're sitting in the next row above them, does that actually help your oxygen intake? No. We have one atmosphere, one Earth. The atmosphere doesn't end at the state line. What we're doing is creating significantly more expense for our state and significantly more expense for our country by doing these mandates.
Okay, to that point, real quickly, I want you to touch on that because so you showed the first top bars there. So the United States has, we have so many resources in terms of oil and gas right here in this country. But in the meantime, China is what they're building, like a new coal plant every single week. And that's what you're getting at, is that they're not the ones we are to follow. They're the ones who are building based on fossil fuels. So they're getting the energy independence when it relates to oil and gas just by doing what they're doing now, in addition to the control they'll have over all the minerals if we move over to renewable energy.
So let me explain where this graph came from. There's a fellow named Scott Tinker who's a geologist who is an energy expert, and he travels around the world learning about how to bring all energy online. He gave a presentation at a conference called ARC, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. Highly recommend that you take a look at it. It's called Have You Ever Seen a Lithium Mine? But he talks about the energy usage and what we need to do looking forward. I don't agree with everything he says, but what he's got in here is absolutely eye-opening, jaw-dropping even. To that point, one of the things he said is that China is bringing online a new coal plant every week. So if we're relying on China to give us the green stuff, all we're doing is having the CO2, which is not regulated in the way that it is the US, the CO2 being created out of China, and it's the same atmosphere. We live, on a globe.
Yeah, it doesn't take that long to get here, by the way. Okay, so to that point, so that's where all this stuff is being kind of extracted. When we look at this particular graphic. Cameron, let's move on to the next graphic because there's something else here. Okay, we're thinking, okay, well, much of that's not extracted out of China. But then we see in this graph that China still has massive dominance when you look at all these various minerals. So explain this. What's the disconnect? What do I not understand here?
So this is where the extraction and processing is controlled. And so what we've shifted from is from where it happens to who controls the supply chain, whether it's the mining or the shipping. And we've gone now from the US not being dominant by any shape, but at least having a reasonable footprint, to the only thing that we have a reasonable footprint on is oil refining. Everything else is outsourced, and 80 to 90% of this is controlled by China. Huh. And when I say China, I mean the CCP, not the Chinese people, the CCP, the organization that is called for the destruction of the United States.
And the reason for that is they have so much power over all the mining in the industry here is because of what's called the Belt and Road Initiative. So they are basically investing in a variety of countries around the world and all these different continents. South America, one of them. We got Africa. And in exchange for doing that, for building their infrastructure, they get their little fair share here. Is that right?
They do, and they get the funding from it. So, of course, they want us to be more reliant on the things that they control and less reliant on the other things. So when we move away from natural gas, when we move away from oil refining, we are making ourselves more, not less, more dependent on China. Even if we're building the batteries here, All of the processing, all of the mining happens under Chinese control.
Okay, because that's a good argument. Because a lot of people, there's a guy, he's an automotive reporter in Detroit, Michigan, but he also, his news reports go out all over the country. And his argument with me has been that, listen, Goshen here in Michigan is a wonderful thing because we're actually now taking the jobs from China and we're doing what we've always wanted to do. We're creating American jobs, and this is American manufacturing. And that was his argument. And that, unfortunately, is what a lot of people believe about this plant here. I had someone last week tell me the same thing. What do you got against jobs? What do you have against Michigan jobs when we're warning people about this Chinese Communist Party controlled manufacturing plant in the state? What do you say to people when they make those types of claims?
If you ask Goshen, and we did, where their employees are coming from, they specifically said they're going to be bringing in significant numbers of Chinese nationals as engineers in order to ramp it up. How long they were going to stay there, they wouldn't tell us. How many of them there were going to be, we figured more than 50, but not sure exactly how long that was going to be. If you want to benefit American-owned companies that don't have affiliations with people who do slave labor, that would be a really good idea. But that's not what we're doing. If you wanted a battery manufacturer, why aren't you looking at battery manufacturers that are initiated, owned, and controlled by the United States? Why aren't we looking to mine within the United States, or at least own the mines elsewhere that have the material that we need? We're not doing that. We're short-circuiting it and actually making it significantly worse by making ourselves dependent on China through these mandates.
So, two more questions. First of all, why? I guess it always comes back to why would we do this to ourselves? Why do you think that the powers that be, this particular administration, is so bent on doing this to the detriment of the United States?
This is the same organization thinks it's fantastic to have open borders and to ship in immigrants that have potentially violent backgrounds without checking. And we've seen the crime associated with that spike. I don't understand why they want to do that. I love this country. I want to work to support this country and the people of this country. It's why I do what I do. But it doesn't appear to be the same motivation from either the Whitmer administration or the Harris administration.
No, they're on the same team on this, and they're being at the very best disingenuous about their intentions on this and the fruit of their labors, if you want to call it that, when it comes to allowing these types of plants to set up shop here in the United States, fully controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. So my final question to you is,
incentivize. What? Not allow, incentivize. They're getting all kinds of federal and state money to come here. It's not like we're looking the other way while they come in. We're rolling out the red carpet and then throwing money at them in the process. And it's not anybody's money. It's your money. It's my money. It's the taxpayers' money. The people who are right now struggling to get groceries for their kids, that money is getting thrown to a CCP affiliated company to create jobs that are going to create more harm for the U.S. and that create a security threat. It makes no sense. Even though they know that, they haven't asked to scale the money back.
Yeah, we got the carrot asking them to come over. And it's the same thing we're doing, as you mentioned, the illegal immigrants who are dangerous. We're asking them to come over here and allowing them to roam free. And we'll put them up in a hotel and we'll provide for their health care and their tuition. And we'll give them driver's licenses. That's happening right now in this country. It makes zero sense unless, to me, my opinion, not yours, and mine is they seemingly want to destroy this country. So my final question to you is, what can we do about it? Is it too late? When you mentioned the Goshen plant in the state of Michigan and these mandates to renewable energy and electric vehicles, can we pull out of this and hopefully save this country before it's too late?
You're doing it. So getting the news out so that people can actually hear and understand that what they're being told is a lie, that this green energy isn't green at all. And we can at some point in the future go into how bad that really is. But most people are busy living their lives. Like I said, they're trying to earn a buck so that they can get the groceries on their table. They don't have time to go through and figure out what's true and what's not true on the internet. There's so much misinformation out there, particularly from the green side. And we just need to make sure that we continue to talk about it and that people continue to share that information with other well-intentioned people.
Yeah. And you're doing the work as well. And I'm so grateful for you and others like you who are in our legislatures and they're being bold and courageous to talk about the reality of these issues. I wish there were more people like you, and I wish there were more journalists out there shining the light on what really is happening here. And it's not what we're all being told. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to speak with you. Senator Lana Theis from the great state of Michigan. Senator, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
All right. Coming up in a moment, we're going to talk about the economy in a bit with Bert Herzog with Executive Wealth Management. But first, I want to bring this up. Again, it's October 7th, 2024. 1 year after the terrorist attack on Israel, 1,200 Israelis and Jews killed in that attack alone. Countries from all over the world have sent representatives to Israel today. And here's how Sky News in Australia is covering it.
Good evening. I'm here in the heart of Israel. 1 year ago, terrorists tried to destroy this nation in one of the darkest days in Jewish history. Today, we remember the invasion that would change both Israel and life as we know it. But we also recognize that Israel is alive. It's fighting. It's determined to survive, and it won't rest until it brings its 101 hostages home. 9-year-old Michael hid in a cupboard. But little Abigail, only 3 years old, was missing.
הרמתי טלפון בשעה כמעט 7 לרועי, רועי לא ענה, זה הסכם בינינו, אם הוא לא עונה הוא מצלם. אז אני מרים טלפון לסמדר לשאול מה קרה. מיכאל, הנכד בן 9, מרים את הטלפון, אומר לו, אני רוצה את אמא, אומר לי, אמא מתה, ואבא מת בחוץ. אני אומר לו, איפה אחותך? עמליה, אומר לי על ידי, איפה אביגיל? אומר לי, לא בבית. בקיצור, שואה.
That's what it was, a nightmare. And it still is for these families who lost. Just so surprisingly out of the blue, that attack that happened 1 year ago today. I remember waking up that morning, could not believe. I thought, is this for real? Is this happening right now? And sure enough, it was back on October 7th of 2023. This should have been taken care of. Hamas should have been rooted out by now. Hezbollah should be decimated. And the Houthis should be taken care of as well. And I spoke with four-star General Jack Keane on a number of occasions regarding this issue. And I completely agree with what he said about Iran, that Iran needs to be taken care of right now. The United States should strike them. And the fear that they're going to retaliate in kind somehow, the generals in the know say that that's not true. They do not want a war with the United States. So let's stop them in their track. We could do that. But the Biden and Harris administration is just going for this diplomacy, and let's just call for a two-state solution, a ceasefire. Let's stop all of this. And no, it will just keep happening again and again and again. And in this regard, I support Benjamin Netanyahu in his fight to root out these terrorist organizations to make Israel safe again. And I think the United States should have that position and that kind of a tact in supporting of Israel, this country, our number one ally in the Middle East. They're surrounded by all these enemies. Let's help them out in their fight for their very survival. All right, look at the markets, the economy, and the latest job numbers that came out on Friday. The job numbers, yeah. Larry Summers, by the way, he criticized the Federal Reserve's half-point rate cut after these stronger than expected job growth numbers in September that we saw on Friday. He called it a mistake in hindsight, looking back to the rate cut. He says the risk of a hard or a no landing, a soft landing looms, he says, forcing the Fed to tread cautiously in future rate decisions. Summers, he was arguing that the September rate cut was a misstep. Given these job numbers that came out. I'm a little skeptical on the job numbers themselves because we've seen some corrections, some major ones in times past. But if the job market is strong, further stimulus could lead to overheating the economy, is what he says, increasing inflationary pressures unnecessarily. So the U.S. economy, what they said on Friday was they added 254,000 jobs. What was expected was about 140,000 jobs. So this is far greater than that. And the data suggests that the labor market does remain robust, is what they're saying, raising questions about the need for aggressive monetary easing. So the unemployment rate dropped to 4.1%. But remember, it was down in the threes not that long ago. So it has gone up quite considerably. The question I have about this, tight labor market and whatnot, that could drive these wages higher is where are these jobs? Where are these jobs? Because you look at the June jobs report that came out. They touted 206,000 jobs added, but the reality is far less impressive. The report masks this deeper issue that is out there, that more than half of those jobs were replacing the jobs, the previously overstated positions from earlier months. So remember, they had to cut, I think it was about 800,000 jobs that they said, we got 800,000 jobs. And then they said later, actually, no, we didn't. That was an overestimate. Sorry about that. And it got some press in the more conservative outlets, but the other liberal ones didn't really want to touch it that much. So those are from earlier months. We lost all those jobs in reality. So there is an unstable labor market under Biden's administration in what I and what other economists have said in the past. And a third of those June job numbers, a third of those jobs were government jobs, pushing the public to private employment ratio dangerously high. So again, those are taxpayer-funded jobs. They're not private sector. And then you look at this trend towards government job growth and it's unsustainable since each government job is supported by taxes from private sector jobs. So we're straining an already overburdened tax base. And then the part-time jobs, you factor those in. Those are the ones that are surging while the full-time positions continue to kind of vanish and all that. I want to get the take on this from our good friend here at Tom Jordan Live, Bert Herzog with Executive Wealth Management. Bert, it's so nice to have you back here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
So what do you, first of all, I guess your impression of this jobs report that came out on Friday, 254,000 jobs. All of the outlets are saying, this is phenomenal. We have a tight labor market. We are thriving once again. What's your take on this?
Well, just to follow up from what you said, it's a bit of a shell game, to be honest with you, Tom.
That's why I look at it.
What's happening is that you're getting a lot of jobs in the government area, but also in services, low-paying service jobs, which are healthcare, which are restaurants. And really, you're not getting the jobs where we need them, which is manufacturing, which is engineering, which is businesses hiring people as we want to grow this economy based on the recovery post-COVID. So in reality, I think what's happening is that, in fact, they've even stated that this is the case with that $800,000 misprint on the jobs.
800,000 jobs.
800,000 jobs. But what's happened is a lot of U.S. citizens are losing their jobs to the tune of 700 to 800,000, where a lot of these new jobs are undocumented migrants, 1.2 million. So it's really a strange seesaw event, and I think they're not really publicizing what's happening to our economy. Now,
okay, so that really is happening. So you said 1.2 million illegal immigrants are getting jobs, and those are included in the job numbers that are coming out?
Yes, they are.
Oh, my goodness.
So, really, it's being misrepresented to the public.
So I heard that. Well, we don't know for sure if that's the. I know it is. I know the number because I've looked at the numbers myself. But they said this will all be borne out when in the census numbers. And I thought to myself, well, the census, they took that question off the census in terms of are you a U.S. citizen or not when they take these census. So it seems to a lot of this seems to be buried.
It's a shell game.
It's a shell game, as you talked about. So. What is the reality? Because when I look around at people I know, and I know this isn't data, but you kind of get an understanding of what's happening in your own communities, in your own states. I know a lot of people who are coming out of college, they cannot find a job, and they're applying to like 300 different places, and they're not getting the jobs that they're being told are really out there. But of course, those are the private sector type of jobs. So the reality of both coming out of school, or if you've lost your position at maybe one of these high tech firms that are laying off, tens of thousands of people, how difficult then is it to get back into the workforce?
Well, it's very difficult, especially with the tech firms not hiring the way they were, and they're laying off people. So a lot of these people coming out of college are getting temporary jobs as bartenders, as service-oriented jobs, waiting for their opportunity to get into this economy. So what really needs to happen is that we need to focus in on providing jobs for the people who are qualified for those jobs. holding on to manufacturing jobs here in this country.
Yeah.
And we're losing those. We lost 24,000 2 months ago. We lost 7,000 here at this last report. And who knows, Tom? I mean, they're always redoing this report. And so I really don't think that this is going to stand a couple months from now when more data comes out.
Typically, when they revise these job numbers, they revise them down, like they're just like we just saw. So 254,000 now, but then you just pull back the layer just a bit, the onion. You kind of find out what kind of jobs these are, as you just described. And the same thing happened in June. I suspect these numbers will be the same thing. Since the pandemic, we look at the inflationary pressures that have been put on our economy over the past 3.5 years in particular, and we look at the wage growth, and we do hear a lot, well, wages are keeping pace with inflation. In fact, they're going past it. But the reality is, at least what I looked at, the inflation-adjusted wages have dropped nearly 4%. When you look at the inflation numbers going up about 21% or so over the past 3.5 years. What is your perspective from your analysis on what's happening with wage growth as it relates to inflation?
Real wages are not keeping up with inflation. And there are various economists and various research organizations that have proved that. So you're getting kind of a mixed review on that, and a lot of times you're hearing only what the press is telling you. Yes, wages are up, but they're not keeping pace with inflation. Okay. Inflation is what's really creating the problems in our economy right now. Government spending, government out-of-control regulation. This is what's creating problems in our economy right now. We have to have a policy that controls inflation. Bring back spending controls, make sure that we cut spending and effectively grow the economy. 1.5% to 2% growth isn't going to take care of this inflation. It's not going to take care of our deficit. It's not going to generate additional tax revenues to reduce our deficit. We need to get growth in this country up to 3 to 4%.
Yeah, and that needs to be in the private sector because these government paid-for jobs don't actually increase, but they would probably increase the inflation rate, and they don't grow the economy like we would like to see it. And that brings me back to this, and I don't want to get political here at all. That's not the point here, but there are two, I guess, larger general theories when it comes, modern monetary theory and the free markets and all those, how they compete with one another. And it does seem, when you look at the upcoming election and the two different positions on economic policy, one side does seem to support more of a government infused, subsidy-driven economy where we're providing the jobs here. If you need a house, we're going to give you $25,000 for a down payment so you can buy a house. And look, we're turning things around in people's lives. And then there's the other approach, which is the free market. No, let's back off on the regulations. Let's back off on the subsidies to lower the inflation rate so people can go out and afford to maybe start a business, or the companies can start hiring more people. When you look at those two general positions on the economy, which one has the most long-lasting benefit for individual citizens?
Well, time and time again, free markets are going to win. And it's proven that throughout history. When you have government influence on an economy, it tends to create problems for that economy. Mm-hmm. It increases deficits. It gets people really relying on the government for their basic needs instead of going out there and working and being productive. So I am not a fan of more government spending. That is the worst thing we could be doing right now, is doing exactly what one party is looking at doing. And again, I don't want to be political,
right,
but I do believe that we need to right this ship so that we have a focus on reducing regulation, reducing spending, and putting ourselves in a position to bring jobs back into this country, good, paying, yes, career-oriented jobs. And I really do think that that will help us reduce the deficit long term. It's going to take a while.
Yeah.
If you grow the economy at 3% per year and we keep spending below that, guess what? As a percentage of GDP, the deficit becomes much more manageable. That happened in the 80s and 90s, after the 70s, and it can happen again. It's just not going to happen overnight.
No, it takes time, and I'm sure it's the same way you advise your clients with executive wealth management on how you handle your finances at home, what the percentages and the ratio, and how much you want to put into investing, and then in savings, and then paying off your bills and living within your means. We're speaking with Bert Herzog with Executive Wealth Management. We do have a question here. We have an interactive audience here in real time. So, what's that? Oh, we don't have one right now. Okay, well, then I'll ask the question. We'll get your questions in a moment, comments and questions. So when it comes to that, when you're talking with your clients, executive wealth management, and they're saying, "Listen, Bert, I had planned my retirement at this such time, but with inflation now coming in, and maybe the stock market's doing well. I know it went up based on the job numbers on Friday, and that was the reaction to it. But I always feel like once they come back to reality, what kind of jobs these are, the markets are kind of level out again in relation to that. But what do you tell your clients who are like, listen, I'm not making what I was. I was going to retire in about 5, maybe 10 years, but now I'm going to have to extend that to maybe 15 or 20. How do you counsel them through these different difficult scenarios?
Well, obviously, each situation is different.
Yeah.
But currently, right now, we are rebalancing to become more taking profits off the table. We've had a great run. And what we try to do with our clients is make sure that they're in a position that they keep their expectations appropriate for retirement income planning. And if they have to work a few extra years, that's what the environment is right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not keeping up with inflation, even though you're making a 6-figure salary.
Right.
It's
Isn't that
crazy.
It is crazy.
Everything's up 20%. And normally, you don't get that type of price increase over a decade.
So basically, if you're making $100,000 4 years ago, that's now the equivalent of making $80,000.
Correct.
It's that 20% inflation. Now, if there's a rise in wages for some people, I guess on average, mine, are they haven't risen at all. But I don't think most people haven't gone up to that, year by year inflationary rate. But I know the average is down about 4%. So okay, let's say maybe now you're making 90 instead of 100,000. But the difficulty remains out there. If taxes go up, like we're told they are going to, based on one of the individuals who might win this office, that further exacerbates the issue, doesn't it? And are there I don't know if there are ways to help mitigate that additional burden when it comes to higher taxes and whatnot. But I mean, what do you tell people when they ask you that? How do I do with this, Bert? I got all these regulations down in my own personal life.
Yeah, personal taxes will go up for the middle class if the current tax law is sunset. There's no doubt about it. And obviously, corporate taxes will go up too. That's been a big push on the campaign trail, is to raise corporate taxes.
And why is that a good or a bad thing?
Well, it's a bad thing because who ultimately pays for those higher taxes?
Right.
The consumer. They're going to pass it along. They want their earnings. They're going to cut jobs to make sure that they get their earnings. They take care of their stock price. They take care of their constituents. So I really think that the tax cuts are going to be very damaging to the tax increases are going to be very damaging to our economy long term.
Yeah.
Really do. And it's not going to generate more revenue, because people are going to pull back. Corporations are going to pull back. Their earnings are going to suffer. And it takes time for this to go through the system as far as price increases. They're going to pass those on to the consumers, and I really think that it's absolutely the incorrect way to go to increase our economy.
Yeah, you don't want to tax corporations. I know everyone thinks, you got to tax the billionaires so they pay their fair share, which, by the way, billionaires are paying like 70% of all the taxes in this country, if not higher than that. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. But another aspect, and something that people say is, well, at least I've got my investments. They can't touch that. Well, there's this whole proposal for unrealized gains, taxes on that. So you're not taking in any revenue from your investments, whether it's in the stock market or elsewhere, but they're still going to tax you as if you're making that money today. So your expenditures goes up year after year, even though your revenue is not increasing at all.
Yeah, that's the most craziest thing that I've ever heard of. Even Mark Cuban thinks that's crazy.
And that's saying something.
Yeah, that is saying something. He's not a Trump fan.
No, he's not. He's very liberal in his policies, too.
I just think that if they're going to tax unrealized capital gains, that really could trigger an unbelievable market correction and perhaps push us into a depression. So that, to me, is the biggest risk out there because that would just decimate the middle class wealth.
It's like they don't want you to invest. They don't want you to earn. It's just this, everyone, it's the equity this is me talking, not Bert, but the equity aspect of this. Everyone ends up the same regardless. We do have a question now from one of our interactive viewers here on Tom Jordan Live. Let's put that up on the screen for Bert Herzog with Executive Wealth Management. Annie says, great question and answer about retirement. Any suggestions for reducing the extra working time? What do you think about that?
Well, always pay yourself first. Attempt whatever you can do to put money away, be it your 401k, your 403b, your IRAs, your Roth IRAs, and building up your cash reserves. And again, that's going to impact your money that you're going to spend for goods and services while you're working, but it's going to put you in a position long term to have a much more comfortable and affordable retirement.
You just have incredible advice, and I'm always grateful to speak with Bert Herzog, Executive Wealth Management. How do people get a hold of you?
We are obviously Executive Wealth Management. You can look us up online. You can also give us a call at 810-229-6446. We're here in Brighton. We have an office in Northville, and we have several other satellite offices around the state of Michigan.
Yeah, and I've memorized the website because I check it out because you have some great news articles and items on there as well as it relates to finance and the economy. It's EWMadvisors.com. EWM stands for Executive Wealth Management, EWMadvisors.com. Bert Herzog is the founder of Executive Wealth Management. Bert, good to talk to you.
Thank you, Tom.
Really
nice to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you. Thanks so much. All right, let's see if we have any other comments or questions. Cameron, I promised our viewers we would get to those comments, questions that you might have. Cameron, do we have any on the screen? We do. Dave Moody. Are you still based in Michigan? I am based in Michigan. My wife and my kids, we love it here. We moved to Michigan about, 11 and a half years ago from some state on the West Coast that we had to get away with because the taxes were going up. Wink, wink, you know what that is? And the cost of living in the schools are going downhill. We moved to Michigan to get away from all of that. And then suddenly, one of the governors won an election who happens to be very good friends with Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. And she liked what he was doing so much that she wanted to make Michigan much like California. But we're not moving again. So we love it here. Our kids are grown up now. And I thankfully am able to stay in this. It is a great state. It's a beautiful state. Here's one of the best kept secrets, and I think people don't fully understand this and realize it, how beautiful of a state Michigan is. We had some relatives come out from the East Coast not long ago, and they toured the state. They went up to Pictured Rocks up in the Upper Peninsula and the Traverse City and the beautiful coastline of Lake Michigan. Do you know that Michigan has more coastline than California? And I heard a rumor that 4 out of 5 Great Lakes prefer Michigan. So that's telling you something. So yeah, we're still here based in the great state of Michigan. Thanks so much, Dave Moody. Appreciate it. Any others, Cameron? We do. Jordan Gedso. If taxes are increased on a business's profits, how does that lead to an increase in the price the consumers pay? If taxes are increased on a business's profits, because as Bert Herzog with Executive Wealth Management just said, they pass that down to the consumers. This is always the case. Any business that sees their costs go up, they raise their prices. This is one of the reasons why inflation or corporate taxes affect the consumer. So when they say, we're not going to raise any taxes on the middle class, we're just going to tax these corporations 45% or whatever the going rate is nowadays instead of the 21%. And I don't have my numbers actually in front of me, but that's, if they could, they would do that. And somehow that benefits the consumer. I would ask you this, what is the benefit to anybody of raising taxes on anyone? I mean, well, you got to think about this. Why does the government want to continue to take more and more money from people who are making money? Why does the government holding on to that help you or me in any sense? It doesn't. It gives them more power and more say over the average American citizen. It is not the government's job. And this, I wish people would understand that the founding of this country was based on the fact that the governments have too much power. And when they get that kind of power, they control your lives. And taxes was a big reason why the United States of America was founded. And we fought the Revolutionary War to get rid of the oppressive regime of Great Britain back then. They wanted to overtax everybody, so people lived in poverty. They couldn't even afford to take care of their children. Why? Not because they weren't able to work, but because the government kept taking money from them. And they will never be satisfied. They have this insatiable desire to take more and more. And if you don't believe me, just look at Canada. Look at these countries in Europe. How much tax the burden they put on their citizens. They say, well, we get free health care. You don't get free health care. You're paying for it, and it's shoddy health care. And I know a few years back there was some proposition or somewhere that we were going to try to make Michigan a state where we provided more, health insurance, just like Canada does right across the Detroit River. It's so great over there. It is not. I know a lot of Canadians who hate it, and they have to make an appointment 9 months in advance to see a doctor because there are fewer doctors, because the doctors don't make enough money to have their own practices because of taxes. So it doesn't help anybody. Just go back to the way the United States used to do it, which was to make it easy for you to live, easy for you to go to work, easy for you to start a business if they have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit without these overburdensome government regulations. So when people say, well, why don't you just make billionaires pay their fair share? Who says what's fair? The government is telling you we need more money, more and more, and it always goes up and they never reduce their spending. So this whole ideology has just got to go away. It is already ingrained in this culture, in the society, but I'm telling you, it hurts the average person all over, whatever demographic you're from. It doesn't help you. And by the way, people were designed to work. I remember in 2021, early that year, after the American Rescue Plan was passed, suddenly there was more money being given to people and they were not working. I was one of the few out there who was working. Bert Herzog was working too, he always does, and the folks at Executive Wealth Management. But we couldn't hire people because they were sitting in IHOP having breakfast at 2 p.m. because they slept in because they were flush with cash. They weren't incentivized to go to work. And what did that do? That didn't do a lot of good things for our economy. Depression, anxiety rates went through the roof. People were designed to go out there and work. There is fulfillment in that. And these subsidies, I tell you, they don't incentivize you to go and get a job or to start your own company. But Jordan, I always appreciate your comments and your questions. Thanks for that. I want to thank you for watching this edition of Tom Jordan Live. Again, just a reminder, you can learn about more of the program at tomjordanlive.com. You can also watch us on YouTube like you're probably watching now, or on Facebook or on X, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I just ask that you would, subscribe free of charge. Just subscribe so you can get our daily informative, we think it is, news content and opinion and news analysis and advice from some of the experts, the greatest experts in a variety of different aspects of our great country. And if you can, go to Patreon. Go to Tom Jordan Live Patreon. You got a small little stipend there. It's $2.50 a month, $2.50, or $5, 2 different tiers. And that provides you some exclusive content in which we are in the midst of developing just for you. Thanks again. Appreciate it. We'll catch you next time. God bless.